Well, we told you in last month's show that from time to time we get celebrities pass through the city of Mission, and this month is no exception. I'd like you to meet our guest for today, Walter Zanger, who, what can you say about him? He has so many credits it would fill up a book, but he's a columnist, he's a television host himself, he's done a lot of work. You may have seen him on A&E Mysteries of the Bible. Walter, well, let's go back a little bit, because though you live in Israel, you aren't in fact from Israel originally, as being born there. Where are you from originally?
I'm American. Originally born in Brooklyn, a nice Jewish boy from Brooklyn, grew up during the Second World War, served in the American Air Force, and then emigrated to Israel when I was already a grown man.
You would have been still a fairly young person at the birth of Israel in 1948. Were you aware that something momentous was happening even then?
Those who know about the workings of American world Jewry know that there was then, and to some extent even now, a difference of opinion on the question of Zionism. It's now almost gone, but in my youth it was serious, and I in fact grew up in a house which was not a Zionist household. Liberal Jewry in those days believed that the function of the Jews was to be a light unto the nations, and therefore to be scattered around the world, and therefore to be very locally and patriotically oriented. So in my case, I don't remember being aware that something momentous was happening, nor do I remember being aware that, that the destiny of the Jews was to go back to Israel, which makes it all the more surprising that I myself, in fact, went.
On the way to going back to Israel, you also became a rabbi, I believe.
That's true. That was part of my education. I did my high school and then university studies. And then actually I was interested in philosophy. And in fact, my first degree I did in philosophy, and Spinoza of all things. Nobody did Spinoza in the 1950s. And then I tried to figure out, what does one do with a philosophic interest? And in those days, and maybe even now, I thought that the best philosophy was being done actually in religious frameworks. So I went to seminary and finished it with the intention of teaching more than actually ministering to people. And in the end, it didn't work. I mean, it wasn't right for me, because the congregations require priestly functions, as well they should, which I didn't want to do. So in the end, I gave up the whole profession of the clergy, for which I was not suited. And Israel was another alternative, so we went.
What was the spur that took you to Israel?
I left America in 1962. Jack Kennedy was president. I spent 2.5 years in Southeast Asia. I was Jewish chaplain of Philippines, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Hong Kong, everything between Okinawa, Australia, and India was me. It was wonderful. I had a parish which was half the size of the Pacific Ocean. It was great. And I had a wonderful time doing it. Then we spent a year in Japan, because my wife is a potter, and she studied in the studio of a famous Japanese potter who is now a national treasure, a living national treasure. Then we came back to San Francisco, and it was 1965. And LBJ was up to his withers in Vietnam. And America was a different place then than it was when I'd left it. Jack Kennedy was dead. And I couldn't really imagine that this was where I wanted to be. I could even less imagine that my son, who was born by then, would serve in that army. There wasn't political for or against the war. It was just a sense of having been away for a long time. When I came back, it wasn't us anymore. Us was, by then, the Jewish people and Israel, which is why I went.
You said that you had given up the clergy, but you didn't give up teaching, because you do a fair amount of work with television, explaining your perspective, which raises an interesting question. It seems to me that you have almost a unique historical perspective. You've seen Israel in modern times, anyway, from its inception right the way through to the present day. What is your take on what is happening there now?
Oh, my. Israel is sort of like Noah's Ark. They're all stuck inside, and all the animals are crazy. I mean, what's happening is conflict, which is symbolic conflict. And this is between Jew and Arab, and this is between secular and religious among the Jews, and, by the way, secular and religious among the Arabs. Now, symbolic conflicts are very difficult to solve. I mean, they never get solved, come to think of it. One thinks of the issue of abortion in America, which is a symbolic conflict. Who rules the country? If God rules the country, then. If the people rule the country, then something else. And you don't ever solve these. There is no there's no solution to the Israeli-Arab or for the Israeli secular and Israeli religious dispute. All you can do is find ways to cut down violence and to allow the sides to live with each other with a minimum of friction. So what's going on is a political process in which the sides are trying to find a way to live with each other and to keep the basic issues which separate them off in the sidelines so that they won't interfere with the day-to-day life. I mean, the people, like in Noah's Ark, have got to live together. They know that. The Israelis know that, the Palestinians know that, the religious know that. They have to live together. They have to find ways to do it without violence and the ways which allow people to get on with their lives with a minimum of interference. Now, the political process is complicated now by the fact that there was a government change in Israel at the end of last May. The Israeli public, Jewish voting public, was unhappy with the risks to which we were exposed as a result of the Oslo peace treaty. They were beginning to think that the risks were too severe. There was a great rise, after Oslo, there was a great rise in terrorism against us. More than twice the number of Jews killed by Arabs in the 3 years since the Oslo agreements, as in the 3 years before. There were huge increases in theft and stealing, and 40,000 cars a year get stolen from Israel and brought in to be chopped up in the territories to be resold for parts. Cattle and sheep, and the situation just wasn't good. So the Israelis voted for a government which would slow down, back off, and try to take a breath and see how it could continue the process with greater security. That was the result of the vote.
Would you say that your view is that the situation is more optimistic or pessimistic since the death of Rabin and the election of Netanyahu?
I've never been optimistic. I've never been optimistic because I know that symbolic battles, who is sovereign in Jerusalem? Symbolic battles never get solved. I think that Netanyahu is a smart man. I also know that there's enormous pressure on him from, for example, the Americans, who are really controlling the game, and that he's smart enough to figure out ways of progressing while staying true to his mandate not to do anything too dangerous. So the test will come in Hebron. Hebron is a very, very difficult issue. If they can figure out a way to get into some working arrangement of the Jewish community in Hebron, then I think that there's hope for the for the process in general.
We've been talking about the political process and the things that are happening at the top echelons of the country, but what's life like for the average Israeli in Jerusalem, for example, these days?
Life for the average Israeli is terrific. The country is prosperous. It has a gross domestic product, which is equal to Western Europe. Living in Israel is like living in Europe. It's not third world. It isn't third world. There are almost no homeless. There's almost no drugs, almost no drunkenness, almost none of the social problems which plague Europe and North America. Life in Israel is okay. Jerusalem is a little bit different because Jerusalem has got lots of Arabs and has lots of very Orthodox Jews, and there you get a lot of tension, not violent tension, it's almost spiritual, almost tension between groups who are stuck in their ways. But apart from that, I mean, it's not violent, for example. My kids jump in a bus and go to the center of town at 10 o'clock at night, and have done so since they were 12 years old, and nobody's afraid of that kind of violence. It doesn't happen. So life in Israel is expensive and a little bureaucratic, and you have to hustle to make a living, and the traffic is bad, and like everywhere else.
Are you like, for example, Vancouver now, we just had a survey which said that now English as a second language predominates. In fact, that the original settlers here, if that's the word to use, are now a minority. I noticed that you're getting a huge influx from Russia. Is that having any effect on life in Israel?
Oh, the Russian influence is having an enormous effect, and for the good. This will be one of the great stories of the 20th century. Israel is a country with 5.5 million people. It absorbed 600,000 Russian immigrants in the space of 3-4 years, from 1990, say, to 1994. To absorb 10% of your population, it's like America absorbing Canada. And to do this with no crime and solve the unemployment problem and a growing economy and a national consensus that this is what you want to do. Because the whole point of Zionism is that you have a place here so that if Jews need a place to go, they have a place to go. Now, this has been terrific. At this point, the Russians are getting well integrated into society. There are problems about, because they're a very highly trained, they're a very highly educated group. They have more PhDs per thousand than the Israelis. They have more doctors and lawyers. Israel was producing 250 doctors a year, and we were getting 300 a month from the Russians. So this kind of population, mathematicians and physicists, not to mention musicians, violin players and all this, and dancers and artists and all the things that the Jews in Russia could do, this has been tremendous. And Israel is now changed, and immeasurably for the better, by this influx of educated, cultivated, musical, reading, literary, highly skilled population. We're better off for it.
Walter, we could probably talk for another 3 hours, but I know you've got pressures on your time. We really appreciate you taking time out. You paint a very vivid picture, certainly one to tempt anybody to go and visit Israel. Thank you for your time. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you at some time in the future.
Well, thank you. Everybody needs to come visit Israel. It's a very interesting place and very beautiful. And of course, we haven't talked about 4,000 years of history.
Which is the topic for maybe another interview, maybe for another show.
Okay, welcome.
Symbolic.